today whom you will serve. God says through his servant Moses. In this passage of 5 verses, today is said 3 times. Do we feel the urgency and importance of this message? God's people, the children and grandchildren of Israel, were gathered with Moses at the edge of the desert. They had come long and far on their journey through the waters out of Egypt, and they had finally made it. Joshua would be their leader to take them across the Jordan into the promised land. And at that moment, they were on the cusp of change. God basically said to them, listen, it is time to decide. Before you go any further, do you trust me? Are you with me? Because things are about to change where you're going. But if you stick with me and work together, living according to my principles, it will go well with you. Today, we are invited to choose life. God is calling us to action. Will we pay attention to what is truly important here and now, right where we are? Will we be present to God's presence with us? Let us calm our minds and tune our hearts to what God is telling us. Every day, we have opportunities to choose what we will do and how we will spend our time. Our thoughts and conversations, our activities and endeavors, in those moments and those hours, shape who we are and what we become. And our actions have consequences. In the opening era of the pandemic, we became aware of the added stress and the worries that we were living under. That was an experience that led many people, including me, to learn more about mindfulness and meditation. One teacher I found through an online course, Dr. Rick Hansen, phrased it memorably. He said, a goal of mindfulness is to let your mind be full of good. It takes time and practice to sit quietly, focus on our breathing, and be patient. When we become still and calm, we are ready to hear that still small voice of God. And then we can receive and know that God is with us and is guiding us to what is good. It takes intentionality to set aside our distractions. That has been true ever since biblical times. But we also have these ever-present things like phones and computers, radios and televisions, things that we let get in the way. Today, God is inviting us to take a rest from revisiting the news and all the worries it brings in order to quiet ourselves and be where we are. One artist whose work evokes a feeling of quiet reflection is Johannes Vermeer. He was a Dutch painter who lived from 1632 to 1675. His works usually feature 1 or 2 people quietly sitting or standing inside doing a daily task. A woman carefully pours milk into a bowl. A woman sits sewing white threads into fine lace. A lady is absorbed in reading a letter or composing a letter. A man studies an astronomer's globe of the heavens or writes down scientific calculations. Maybe he's preparing a legal document. Some paintings have 1 or 2 people playing an instrument in a well-appointed room, and nearly all of them have light coming through a window to the left. Vermeer took care to arrange the space in an orderly way, capturing a moment of concentration, capturing a conversation, And in these paintings, we see people that we would call today are in a state of flow. Vermeer, during his lifetime, was appreciated in his hometown of Delft, but was not very widely known. Then his work was forgotten for 200 years. But in the past century, he has been celebrated. I think it is because in our busy world of distractions, his beautiful, quiet scenes catch our attention. We feel drawn to be like them. We want to sit down with those purposeful people and spend some time learning from them. Maybe listening to the music they create. Maybe we want to be like them, living fully present in the moment. When we take time to observe these images, it's like we have come across the room in their home, and we have been invited to join them, to close the door and sit for a while and be part of something very meaningful of being alive. I was reminded of Vermeer this week because a special exhibit of his paintings has been assembled and just opened at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. It took years of planning and collaboration among an international group of museum curators to bring together 28 of the 34 authenticated Vermeer paintings. Some of these paintings have been sent from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Frick collection being closed for renovations made it the perfect time to loan their works. In an article about the exhibit, the author stated that the last major Vermeer exhibit was at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. in 1995, and at Mauritshuis, The Hague in 1996. I was lucky enough to see it in both places back then. I was an intern at the NGA, so I had a little employee discount. And let's say I visited the gift shop thoroughly. Well, when they said that this exhibit is now available for a new generation, I felt a little old, but I see that since that time, the technology has improved and they're able to do all kinds of studies underneath the surface of the paint to learn more about the paintings. Well, I managed to spend a lovely afternoon visiting the churches in Delft, including the Old Kirk where Vermeer was buried, and a plaque commemorates him. He was a person who grew up in the Reformed Christian faith and became a Roman Catholic believer when he got married. And he and his wife had 10 children who survived to adulthood. You may be familiar with a novel by Tracy Chevalier that was made into a movie, but it was fiction. Most likely, it was Vermeer's wife who was the lady in the paintings, wearing that yellow fur-trimmed garment. And it was probably their daughter who was the model for a girl with the pearl earring. Viewing his artworks, either in person or online or in a book, brings a feeling of peace. One painting that relates to our scripture passages today is called Woman Holding a Balance, painted between 1662 and 64. A woman stands perfectly still at a table, holding a balance to weigh things. Light from the window streams in, and she looks carefully at the balance, making sure it is steady so that she knows it is accurate before she uses it. This is a biblical theme, as God cautioned through the prophets that we must engage in truthful business practices, not cheating with incorrect scales. As you look closely at the painting, you see that she has her jewelry box open on the table with a pearl necklace and gold overflowing. And then you realize that she is visibly pregnant, probably 7 or 8 months along. And the painting on the wall behind her is of the Last Judgment. Is this meant to lead us to a meditation on the weighing of the scales at the end of our life, considering our life and the afterlife. In the 17th century as now, being at the threshold of giving birth is a vulnerable situation for the mother and the baby. Perhaps we are meant to consider how we are living, whether we have heard and listened to God's voice, and what our place will be when God weighs us and our deeds in the balance. Do we hear an echo of the voice of Moses? He urges us to choose life today by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, so that you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you. In the gospel passage, Jesus speaks of the consequences of living in ways that go against God's will, destructive patterns that have consequences for us and our community. He mentions being brought before the council, which refers to the religious authorities. He also speaks of the final day of judgment. Jesus starts from the perspective of an overview of key teachings in the Ten Commandments, and then he brings us into a closer look about how we live on a daily basis. He wants us to understand how we should think and speak, how we should behave in order to nurture life-giving relationships with each other. Did you read about the results of the 85-year study by Harvard researchers on health and longevity? They evaluated the health records of more than 700 people over many decades to find out what factors contributed to living a long and healthy life. It turns out that researchers confirm something that we already know intuitively. What brings people joy and enables them to live long and well, it's not money, successful careers, or diet and exercise, although these things can be part of a good life. When they're completely lacking, a person suffers. But the big takeaway from this study is relationships. Having positive relationships is central to our life and well-being. We know the importance of the command, "Thou shalt not murder." We can respect and uphold that in our lifetime, but Jesus translates it into our attitude on an idle afternoon at home or at work, when we might overreact to something, maybe respond too quickly to what our sister says, or get worked up about something our brother does or does not do. Jesus cautions us not to get too angry or insult them. He wants us not to disparage other people or make comments about their intelligence or abilities. If we say something mean to them, like, "You fool," that is really damaging our relationship. That would hurt their feelings and they would remember it. And that would be like a cold block of ice, blocking them from feeling loved by us. Jesus doesn't want us to trample on other people's feelings. And so he's bringing it to our level. He's saying it's serious as the injunction against murder. We will have to answer to God for the hardness of our heart against other people. So if we're trying to be reconciled to God and worship God, if we pray for God to answer our prayers and requests, we first need to come clean with our family and loved ones. Once we say that we're sorry to them, we will have a clear conscience, and God will be ready to listen to our prayers. Next, Jesus addresses the commandment, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." He explains that this relates to how we treat our partner by honoring and valuing them specifically as the one we love with loyalty. We should keep our focus on them and not take them for granted or look elsewhere for romance. This is appropriate this week with Valentine's Day on Tuesday. Jesus teaches us that the true meaning of this command also has to do with how we view people in general. We are to guard against temptation and impure thoughts, and we should not objectify others or reduce them to a stereotype. In the past decade, Americans in our culture have made a lot of progress in becoming more aware of the negative effects of discounting others based on their outward appearance or physical factors or judging people. The third big issue Jesus wants us to take seriously relates to our relationship with God and our use of language. These two concerns go together. Jesus warns us to uphold honesty and keep our word without taking the Lord's name in vain. He says, "You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord." We need to guard against saying things hastily or uttering God's name as though it means nothing. Like that surprised thing that people say, OMG, it just pops out and they're not even considering what it means to refer to God. I found a beautiful prayer of reflection to be used at the close of the day that we can use to look back and say as a way of asking God to bring resolution in our relationships. It's part of a prayer by Jane Austen. She wrote, "Incline us, O God, to think humbly of ourselves, to be severe only in the examination of our own conduct, to consider our fellow creatures with kindness, and to judge all they say and do with that charity which we would desire from them ourselves." Today, the Lord advises us to live fully present in the moment. Let's do so wisely. With our friends and family, now is the time to apologize first and make amends. Don't wait until some time later. The people who survived the earthquake in Turkey and Syria may wish that they had said words of forgiveness or love before it was too late. If only they had taken the time to set aside distractions and really talk with their loved ones and listen more often. It is such a terrible tragedy. So many people were killed suddenly. Homes collapsed and so many people were made homeless. Thank goodness for the search and rescue teams who have been working diligently to recover people and help get them to medical care. Even if the people who died were embracing life before then, it is so sad that they are gone. For those who survived, may they be comforted and find grace in the tender memories they shared with their loved ones. So for us today, let's keep choosing life. Let's use the phone to connect and show kindness to our family and friends. Let's be like those people in the Vermeer paintings and write a letter or a card of encouragement, not just for Valentine's Day. Let's keep seeking to follow the Lord's way that leads to our good and the betterment of all. Amen.